training and record keeping, and then label and packaging. Jess has got manufacturer verification, lab testing and spec sheets, holding and distribution, and then material review and disposition. And then Tammy for sales has got product returns, customer complaints, and then product recalls. And of course, all these, anything we do around these SOPs is a team effort, but just, it's good to know who to go to when you have questions. So first, we're going to go through a training and record keeping. And we basically want to make sure that we review all of our policies, we do it on an annual basis, and that we keep track of when we've trained. So we have a training form that we can use, and you can see the link in this PowerPoint. And this PowerPoint is also, I sent you a link in an email this morning, but it's also in our Google Drive, so you can reference it later. But we want to clarify and communicate any quality assurance or quality control responsibilities to all of our team members. We want to maintain a checklist of appropriate roles for members of the team. We will be trained once a year. We are going to make sure we have timely and accurate completion of our checklists or anything regarding quality assurance or quality control. And then we need to make sure that we communicate any plans we have around those things, anything regarding quality assurance or quality control. Okay, training record keeping continued. Anybody who does QC activities needs to keep it distinct and separate from other responsibilities. So this is actually an FDA requirement. So basically, if you're doing quality control, that should be your only focus, not other things. You have to have the education, training, or experience to be able to do those things. And then when we supervise quality assurance tasks, we need to see if there's someone else who can, so we can keep those separate. So if Jess is doing QC, then I could have oversight, or vice versa. If I'm doing QC, Jess could have oversight. That way it's just to make sure that we have, a second set of eyes on our quality. Okay, manufacturer verification. We want to make sure that our manufacturers are FDA regulated and that they have the appropriate certifications. So I believe some of those certifications are renewed on a biannual basis, so every 2 years. But we've noted in the training just to double check those certifications each time we do the training, just so we can have, something to put on a calendar, so we can make sure that we've got up-to-date certificates. And then when we bring in a new manufacturer, new vendor, we have them complete our vendor qualification form. It's currently found on our website, or we can send it to them. We have a link in this document. And that just basically ensures that, we've got the right person for the job, so to speak. They are ensuring our brand. So we want to make sure that they're meeting what they put in the spec sheets, and that we have a verified source and specification of ingredients. Okay, our manufacturers are to have a minimum of 10-year history of natural health. We need to ensure that they are bringing us the finest ingredients, and part of that is, that we verify through our vendor form. Every shipment in those products has to have a lot number, the country of origin, date of manufacture, shelf life and justification of that, storage conditions that are required for any product, any statement of analysis they may have of the products, and then FDA standards for microbial content, heavy metals, solvents, pesticides, any analysis of that, and then of course allergen statements. So labeling and packaging. We have this standard operating procedure to serve sort of a dual purpose. This will be not only to meet FDA requirements, but also to meet our brand guidelines. The FDA is very specific as to how we put information on a label. And Katrina, thankfully, is very well versed in what those requirements are. But the things that we have to have on there per FDA is that we have to have a statement of identity. So we have to say what the product is. We have to say how much of the product is in the container. We may or may not need supplements, so supplement labeling. For instance, our teas may not need a supplement label, but the rest of our products do. And then if we do have that supplement label, that then makes us susceptible to the FDA requirements. We have to list what the ingredients are. We have to have our name and place of business. And actually, it's very specific where that has to be on the label. We have to have our disclaimer statement that says our products aren't intended to treat, heal, or cure any diseases. And then anything that is on our label for our actual product has to match what is on our website. So as we gear up to do the Herbal Goodness website, we'll have to make sure that we are really stringent on those regulations to see, make sure it matches up. And again, that's not only for meeting those FDA requirements, but also just for our branding, for consistency. So to make it easier on us, we created a label checklist and an approval log anytime we do a new label. And again, those are, for our sake and the FDA's sake. We have to have proper location of each label item. And like I said earlier, the place of business has to be in a certain spot. But this would also apply to where we place our logo or where we put, the little icons of, women-owned or made in the USA, that sort of thing. Make sure that we're following those guidelines. And then also the CGMP rule requires us to protect against contamination and deterioration and to avoid any mix-up of our products. And then we just need to make sure that when the product is finished, it meets the specs. Any questions so far? Okay.
No.
All right, lab testing and spec sheets. So before we sell something, we have to test it and make sure that it meets our standards for quality control. For instance, when we had some questions about the 16-ounce, Jess sent it out for testing to see if there was anything wrong with the product. So this is just, basically telling us what the steps would be in that process. So we would get a sample of the product, get the certificate of analysis, and cross-check that with the spec sheet. And then once every 2 to 3 years, we may randomly test batches of components or raw ingredients just to make sure that they are what we're saying they are. And then, of course, we need to record what we do. So we need to maintain much of this information on our batch record, which lists the batch of ingredient, finished products, labeling, and packaging. For the dietary supplement, manufacturing vendor, the lot numbers, and then quantity and date of manufacture. And then as far as testing, we just need to determine whether it's okay or whether we need to reject the product itself. And then if we do reject it, then we just need to have a plan of action. So, quick question, sort of our quiz. How long should we keep our product records?
3 years.
All
3 years.
right. Good job. A+, Tammy. All right, holding and distribution. We need to make sure that we know the procedure required to hold and distribute ingredients or products that are distributed by our warehouses or on our behalf. So we are responsible for the oversight of any quality issues, make sure that they're resolved. According to the CGMP rule, we need to hold components, supplements, packaging, labeling under appropriate conditions in regards to temperature, humidity, light. We need to make sure that there's no mix-up of the products, contamination, or could be any deterioration of the products. And, of course, we need to record what we find as well. Okay. Material review and disposition. Quality team will conduct all required material reviews and make all required disposition decisions. We basically need to, it's kind of like when we look at a product before it goes on the shelf. We need to consider texture, color, aroma, taste, packaging, make sure it's like appropriately sealed when we look at a product, and then we need to approve and release that product, or we need to reject it. And again, we need to record that. And material disposition record is also maintained in the e-fulfillment center records, which is efulfillmentservice.com. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay. All right. Product returns. So this is Tammy and Lorraine's expertise. But basically what we want to do is make sure that customers can return a product if they're unsatisfied. Customers can return anything unopened for any reason within 60 days. Unless it's like a special order or a raw ingredient or one of the bulk purchases. So those products are returned to our warehouse. It has to specify who the customer was, their contact information, and the order number. And then we need to inspect it to make sure that it's in its original state. And if it is, then we can restock it. But if it's damaged, then of course we would discard it. And then again, we have to record that information, and there's a link within this slide.
So just Arina, just to say that EFS does that for us, and I think we know that EFS is looking at is the one doing that process. So we just need to know and make sure.
Right. Right. Okay. So when we have a product return, we need to identify, and they call it quarantine, but basically we need to see if it's in okay shape, or we're responsible for overseeing this, even though our manufacturer does this, or our fulfillment center. And of course, if it's no good, then we have to dispose of it. If it's okay, then we'll salvage it. And basically we need to, as they call it, conduct an investigation. But we don't reprocess any contents of a returned dietary supplement unless it's, if it's just a labeling issue. For instance, like the 16 ounce, we deemed it to be okay and we continued on with that product. Customer complaints. So ultimately, customer service is responsible for customer complaints. However, anybody that interacts with a customer would be responsible. What we need to do is identify what their complaint is. We need to record the complaint, and there's a link to their Tammy and Lorraine's log in there. We need to say what the reason for concern was, the lot number of the product, and the date, just for tracking purposes. And then we need to evaluate the level of risk of that complaint. And then we need to make sure that the appropriate people know. If it's an elevated complaint or becomes, seems to be a pattern, then of course we would let UNOMA know, and then we would, analyze the product, just like we did recently with the 16 ounce. So this slide just outlines those levels of complaints and what we would do about it. So if there's no return, then essentially there's nothing that needs to be done. A green alert would be if the smell or taste is different from a previous batch. So that kind of just makes us aware, but it doesn't really necessitate any major action. An orange alert would be if we had somebody who had an allergic reaction or some sort of intestinal reaction, they had any bloating or diarrhea or that sort of thing. Then we would take a closer look at the product. We may, send the product out for analysis. And then for a red alert, which could lead to a recall, could be something like an illness or something as severe as death. Thankfully, we've not had to deal with that. But basically, we would need to analyze the product and, as a group, determine what the next step would be, which again we've modeled in what we did recently with the 16-ounce. So if we actually had to do a recall, and we weren't quite sure at first if we'd have to do that with the 16-ounce. So I think we were initially calling it a red alert, but I don't know that it was necessarily a red alert, but I think we handled it well. But basically, if we got to the level where we would have to recall a product, we've got a very outlined process of what we would do. Is we would identify the customers affected by the product recall, identify the lot number. We would have a product recall spreadsheet, and basically all the things that we've tracked so we can easily access those customers who purchased the products. So dates and shipments of the products, and then we would have to send a warning letter or a recall letter to those customers who bought those products so that they would be aware that we're asking for those products back and they shouldn't use them. And then, of course, if we do get to a recall, we would have to notify the FDA. Okay. That concludes the training of our 9 standard operating procedures. And again, if you go into Google Drive and you just do a search for SOP, this training will pop up, as well as probably our folder that has each of these policies in Google Drive.
Arina, I have a question for you.